Thank you for coming. So part of the summit is, combining ancient wisdom with new science. And I think you embody that because you have fascinating background as a medical anthropologist and was a clinical professor at a very young age who kind of left and went to the Amazon to study energy medicine and shamanism. Can you explain a little bit about your background and what you do?
Sure. I started out in a brain laboratory at San Francisco State University. So we were trying to see if we could create psychosomatic health, because we knew we could create psychosomatic disease, but how do you use this amazing potential of the brain, of the mind, to create health? And I discovered that I could not find that in the laboratory. So I shut down my lab at San Francisco State and went to the Amazon to work with people that didn't have MRIs, didn't have technology, but they had the access to the resources that we have to create health. But then I brought it back to the laboratory. So then I wanted to see how it is that the brain can reconfigure itself to create extraordinary states of awareness, of consciousness, and of health.
Yeah. So how long were you became a shaman, essentially?
Well, I didn't become a shaman. I'm still a medical anthropologist, but I did study with the shamans, and I did become a shaman. It took about 25 years, though, because I had too many degrees.
Yeah. Amazing. So in the jungle, I've heard, a lot of the indigenous peoples, they're not manifesting the same disease as a lot of the people here in Western society. Heart disease, Alzheimer's, all of these. So their ways of health, they're creating psychosomatic health, right? So what are the keys to...
Well, the first thing is avoiding psychosomatic disease.
Okay.
So that's the first key. And when I first went to the Amazon, I was actually funded by Big Pharma because the Amazon is nature's pharmacy. And they wanted to discover the next big breakthrough drug for heart disease or dementia or Alzheimer's or cancer. So they funded me for 3 months, and I went to backwater villages that had never seen a light-skinned person. In fact, the kids would run up to me and they would rub my skin to see if the white dirt would rub off.
Oh.
And after 3 months, I came back empty-handed because every one of the villages that I went to, they had no cancer, no heart disease, no Alzheimer's. These are the illnesses of the West, of our diet and of our lifestyle. In fact, their definition of disease was completely different from ours.
What was their definition?
Well, see, we have over 14,000 different illnesses in the West. For them, for the shamans, diseases don't exist. Illnesses are just a definition that we give to a combination of symptoms. So illnesses don't exist, sick people do, but not diseases. Diseases really don't exist. And that's the problem that we have in Western medicine, is that we define diseases and then we define treatment protocols based on pharmaceuticals, and we're treating every disease in the same way. But now science is telling us, for example, that breast cancer is not a single disease. It's 11 different illnesses. So we're looking at dismembering, disassembling this tremendous structure that we've created in Western medicine of defining symptoms as being real illnesses, and then treating the illness instead of treating the person. And then what we end up with is a disease care system instead of a healthcare system.
Right, and which is clearly not working.
Which is what we have, which is collapsing. It's,
yes.
Today, Alzheimer's didn't exist 100 years ago until Dr. Alzheimer's discovered it and named it. And what I noticed in the Amazon is that as soon as civilization arrived and people began to eat like us and behave like us, they began to get sick like us and to die the way we die.
So do you believe that, I believe that our bodies, we're designed to heal, right, in every moment. We're regenerating and rejuvenating and repairing. Can you reverse any disease? Can Alzheimer's, with the change of lifestyle, diet, maybe spiritual practices, can you reverse any disease, or is that complicated?
It depends we've got to go back to the premise that illnesses do not exist.
Okay.
And that prevention, see, the work of the shamans is about prevention. Prevention is like changing the oil in your car. And treatment is like changing the engine. It's a lot more complicated. And in the traditional healthcare models, if the community was healthy, then the healer lived really, really well. If the community got sick, the shaman or the healer got fired. Whereas in the West, if the community is sick, then the healer lives really, really well. So the focus was on prevention. And we know that we can prevent Alzheimer's. We can prevent dementia. We know the strategies to do it. We know that if you cut out the sugars, if you go into ketosis, that these will, Alzheimer's is being called type 3 diabetes. And because it's the relationship to sugar. And the statistics today are terrifying. If you live to be 85 years old, you have a 50% risk of having diagnosable Alzheimer's. If you live to be 90, then we will, you have a 75% risk. Now, this didn't exist 100 years ago.
Oh my gosh. So we need the keys to prevention.
We need to prevent, and we know how to do that today. We know how to prevent it, both from a dietary and nutritional standpoint. But what the shamans contributed was the energy medicine. So they work with a luminous energy field that surrounds the physical body, and that is the blueprint of the physical body. So it's an information field. It's not just energy like to make heat. It's an information field. And if you can upgrade the quality of the information, then you don't have to run the default programs, the genetics that you inherited, the heart condition, the breast conditions. You can clear those imprints from the blueprint so you don't have to manifest disease. And this is the foundation of energy medicine.
So they work with altering the field, clearing the field, and then that affects the matter.
Precisely. They work with the field. And we all have an energy field. That's our field state. But in medicine, we focus only on the particle state. So we know from physics that every photon has a field state and a particle state. This is our particle state. But if we can work on the field, we can work with prevention. We can upgrade the information in the field so we don't have to live out the dramas that run in our families or the illnesses in our families. And we can actually participate in growing a new body that ages differently and that heals differently and that dies differently.
So if someone is facing a diagnosis and they come to you, how do you work with the client? It's a combination of lifestyle and nutritional medicine and then energy medicine. What does the energy medicine look like? You need an outside healer, right, to facilitate?
The healing always comes from the mother, from Mother Earth, from Pachamama. And we're simply the instrument. So the minute that you think that you're healing someone, you're cutting off this tremendous stream of energy and of power that's available to each one of us to heal ourselves. So my work is to reconnect, to take my client back to the mother. And when they go back to the mother wants us to be well. Our mother wants us to be well. And it's not me doing things to my client. I can do some of the techniques, but ultimately it's the earth, it's Mother Earth, Pachamama, that restores balance in the body. What I do when I work with a patient, I see a client comes into my office, and what I see coming into my office is a golden Buddha, a totally illumined being. Because we know from physics that wherever it is that you look for a particle, that's where you're going to find it. So if I see walking into my office a diagnosis, a cancer patient, that's what I'm going to find. And if I see a luminous being walking into my office, we're setting the bar really high. And then healing, then miracles can happen.
I love that. Yeah, it's the particle theory, right? Like if you're expecting wave or particle, that's affecting the outcome of the
Precisely.
The experiment.
Yep. So the first thing is to prepare the healer for miracles. So if you're working with a doctor, you're working with statistics. And Western medicine is fantastic. It's really great for trauma. but it's not very good for chronic conditions. So that if you get bit by a snake, you don't want to go to a shaman. You want to go to the ER. And then you want to go to your shaman to find out why the snake bit you in the first place. Because in the shamanic and the energy medicine practices, there's no difference between being killed by a microbe or being killed by a jaguar. Whereas for us, being killed by a microbe is an illness, and being killed by a jaguar is an accident. It's bad luck. You've got to be in right relationship with microbes and with jaguars. Otherwise, they're both going to be looking at you as lunch.
Yeah. I love when you talk about we're in the Western model, we're not looked at as golden Buddhas, we're looked at as statistics, right? And I feel like the prognosis that doctors give to patients just perpetuates this bell curve of, not great outcomes. So
you end up in the fat part of the bell curve,
yeah,
where you don't want to be. You want to be an outlier.
And you can be, right?
Yeah, totally.
So that's what I really, we talk about, like, go get your diagnosis, right? Find out what's going wrong, which is what you did. But the prognosis, don't fall into that bell curve. Don't, buy into what the doctor's telling you is possible with your life, right? So how do you encourage people to be that 20% or that 10% or that 5%? How did you do it?
Well, a couple of different things. Have you noticed when you get a diagnosis how you're told you have to go into surgery immediately, tomorrow morning? So you get caught in this system, which to me is really sorcery. It's black magic. Mm-hmm. Because you're given not a diagnosis, you're given a death sentence. And a diagnosis is helpful in terms of how you can treat whatever it is that they find. But you've got to remember that you're not a diagnosis. You're not an MRI. You're not a liver function test. You're a living miracle. And if we begin to think that we're a diagnosis, then we become a patient. And when I work with clients, I remind them that you're a miracle. Now, you have the option of becoming a patient and becoming a cancer patient and doing a cancer track, and then you fall into the fat part of the bell curve. The bell curve is the snake that ate a hat, and you don't want to be in the fat part. You want to be in the outlier where miracles happen. 2% of all medical healings are spontaneous remissions. 2%. That's where I want to be. Because that's what the body is designed for. The body is designed to heal incredibly rapidly if you give it the resources. And one of the most important resources, not only nutritional and your lifestyle and how you forgive, but returning to the mother. Returning to Mother Earth, reconnecting to nature, to your own nature, and to the spirit of Gaia, of the planet. So let me tell you a quick story. I was having dinner with friends a couple of weeks ago that are scientists, and they said to me, Alberto, have you read the recent research on probiotics, that they're totally useless? They don't work. And I go, yeah, that's bad experimental design. And they go, what do you mean bad design? This is Harvard. I said, yeah, it's bad design. If you design the experiment badly, you're going to get bad results. So they said, explain, what do you mean? Well, the mind of the planet, the heart and the mind of Gaia is bacterial. Because bacteria have been here for 2,000 million years. And probiotics are good bacteria. Now, Gaia knows that there's this tremendous extinction event that we're in the middle of. And they know that we're the problem. That we're the parasites that are causing so much damage in the earth. So your probiotics, you've got to talk to them. They're living creatures. You've got to tell them, look, I'm part of the solution. I'm not part of the problem. If they think you're part of the problem, your probiotics might try to do away with you. If you tell them you're part of the solution, then they'll come and they'll restore your flora and they'll create health for you. So we live in a living universe. This is a living, breathing relationship with the planet that we're intrinsically connected to. And that our healing has to do with reconnecting with that consciousness that is Gaia, that is the mother, that is the Pachamama.
Yeah, there's an intelligence, right?
It's an intelligence, yeah. And this is the experiment. See, we're part of a biological experiment. and it said there are 40 million species in the planet. And out of the 40 million species, there are only 2 species in which the female is able to go into menopause. In every one of the other species, as soon as the female is not reproductively useful, she's wiped out. She dies.
Yikes.
Except for 2 species, humans and orcas, dolphins, because we have the biggest brains, the biggest brain to body weight ratio. So we're taking part of an experiment in intelligence. Nature prefers intelligence to muscle, to brawn, to claws, to teeth. She prefers brains. And this intelligence is what we call consciousness or spirituality. So you've got to be part of the experiment. You've got to upgrade the quality of your intelligence. And if you upgrade it, then you're allowed to live a long and healthy life. If you don't, you're going to be creating psychosomatic stress and creating cancer and heart disease and dementia.
Yeah, so what's coming up is like fear disconnects you from that intelligent. Fear
Precisely.
takes you into those other 40 million minus 2 species that are in survival, right, and instinctual. So how does fear play a role, in all of these problems that are manifesting physically?
Fear is really helpful. It's a really good warning system. But the minute that it paralyzes you, it sets off a series of chain reactions that will destroy the brain, because you'll be producing cortisol and adrenaline and flooding your brain with these toxic hormones that are deadly, that will begin to shrink that part of your brain where you can have a new learning experience. So cortisol is very damaging to the region in the brain known as the hippocampus, which is where learning happens. So the minute the hippocampus is damaged, it'll shrink to about half of its size. And then you can't learn anything new. Then you live in the world of been there, done that. Then you wake up with your beloved that you've been with for 30 years and you go, who is this person in my bed? But if your hippocampus is not damaged, if it's repaired, you wake up with your beloved and you go, who is this wonderful person in my bed that we've been together for 30 years? You're able to have a new experience. You're able to create health. You cannot create health if your hippocampus is damaged. This is where we create our destiny. This is the part of the brain that regulates how we manifest reality internally and externally. And it's damaged by the stress hormones, and it's all triggered by fear. Fear triggers the fight or flight response. That triggers the production of adrenaline and cortisol that damages the brain, but we can repair it. We know how to repair it today.
Okay, can you tell us how?
Yeah. There are 3 things that repair the brain. One of them is forgiveness. Forgiveness is essential. Compassion will repair the brain, but it's a funny dynamic because you cannot be compassionate if your brain is damaged. If your brain is broken, you're going to be living in fear. So the other thing is DHA, the omega-3 fatty acids. In 6 weeks, the omega-3s will repair the hippocampus, and there's really good science behind this. The other thing that does it in the Amazon, there's a series of medicine plants that will repair and upgrade the brain. And what I discovered over a course of 20 years in the Amazon is that I asked an old medicine woman, how can I prevent the illnesses of old age? The dementias, the Alzheimer's, the heart disease. And she said, no problem. If you want to prevent the illnesses of old age, just live a long and healthy life. And I said, but wait a minute, you don't understand what I'm asking. And she said, no, I do. And what she meant is that there are plants that don't treat disease, but that switch on the genes that create health and silence the genes that create disease. So they silence more than 500 genes that create breast conditions and heart conditions and cancer. And they switch on more than 200 genes that create health.
Do we know what these plants are?
And today we know what these plants are. We can get them at the health food store locally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. See, I wrote a book 4 years ago with David Perlmutter,
Okay.
and it's called Power Up Your Brain. And these are the plants that repair the brain, that allow you to access a new kind of intelligence, and that begin to flip genetic switches to create health. And we know them today. They're resveratrol, sulforaphane, the broccoli seed extract, curcumin, curry. These are the ones that we work with in the West. The shamans work with other plants that are in the Amazon, but that have the same effect. They work along the same pathway, which is called the NRF2 detox pathway, that triggers detoxification in the body and that switches on the longevity genes, what I call the immortality genes, that we all have. And these are the sirtuin genes, the SIRT1 genes. So how did the shamans know about this? How did they know that these plants were the upregulators that allow you to create health?
I don't know. How did they know?
You know, I asked, how did you discover these plants? It's the same with the ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a medicine plant of the Amazon. And it requires two ingredients that work together. One is the chacruna, which produces DMT, and the other one is an MAO inhibitor that allows the DMT to go into your bloodstream and into your brain. How did you know that these two plants work together in synergy? And they said, easy. The plants told us. The plants told us.
So this is what you mean by connecting with Mother Earth, again, in nature. And I mean, how does that look for a Westerner? Is it they have to go into the jungle and go on a vision quest, or is it as simple as just hiking in nature and finding these plant medicines? How do we reconnect with nature?
How do we reconnect with nature? Well, going out for walks in nature is important. Eating organic, eating natural, blessing your food. But even more important is that beginning of a journey back to Mother Earth. And that's an inner process. And it begins by reclaiming your body, finding those parts of your body that you really don't like and reclaiming them. That part of you that you think people are going to, that little bit of fat reclaiming your body, saying, yes, I love my body. I love myself. You are the product of 2,000 million years of evolution. So love yourself, love your body. And then it's important to find that dialogue with the earth again. So you know that we're the only people in the planet that were ever kicked out of the Garden of Eden, that were ever kicked out of our relationship with nature, where we could speak with God and to the rivers and to the trees, and God and the rivers and the trees and the plants and the herbs would talk back to us. So we're the only people that have been cast out of the garden. You know, the Aborigines weren't, the Sub-Saharan Africans weren't, the Native Americans weren't. They were given the garden to be the stewards and the caretakers of the garden. So you return to nature by making a commitment to become a steward and a caretaker of the earth, to become an earth keeper. The minute you make that commitment, the connection is automatic. You can go for a walk through nature and enjoy nature and hear the sound of the birds and the leaves rustling, and it's beautiful. But nature will not connect with you until you make that commitment to become a caretaker of the earth. And then you have the full bandwidth of the connection.
Yeah, I feel like for me, the theme of ultimately healing is like a spiritual journey. It comes down to how you look at the world, whether you look at other humans as golden Buddhas and that we're all miracles, or if you look from kind of a fearful lens. Can you talk a little bit about how important spiritual practices are, or how important our beliefs and perception of life are to our health?
Yeah. I think that this is the missing element in our health systems, is the spiritual path. And for me, healing is not complete until you have a spiritual experience that launches you in a spiritual journey. Not just an epiphany, not just going, wow, I'm connected, but it's got to launch you on a spiritual journey of quest and discovery.
I like how you say that nobody on the planet is older than 7 years old, because our bodies and our cells literally regenerate. It's a whole new body every 7 years. I feel like that gives, so if someone has cancer for 20 years or some sort of other chronic condition, how can we switch their mindset to say, like, no, we can, our body regenerates. So is that like our belief system, our focus on the illness that's keeping it in place? And do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you're saying about three different things, but I have a sense of what you're saying. See, there's nobody in the planet older than 7 years old, because we grow a new body every 7 years. And you can either grow a slightly more wrinkled and older version of who you are today, or you can grow a new body that ages and heals and dies differently. For example, your skin cells die every 6 or 7 days. The mucosa, that's the lining of your gut, is changed every 3 days. The lining of your lungs is every 4 days. Your bones change every 5 to 6 years. So you grow an entirely new body. And we know that we can be conscious participants in that process, because this is how nature renews our health. But when we become toxic, with toxic emotions and with the toxic chemicals we've been exposed to, 100 years ago, there was no mercury anywhere. And I remember as a kid playing with the mercury when the thermometer broke. And then I went to the dentist and she put mercury in my mouth. So we've become toxic. So that process of renewal will not take us to healing and regeneration until we detoxify. Because these are toxins that shamans never had to deal with. There are over 78,000 toxic elements in the environment today that we use regularly. And not to, there's also the glyphosate and the antibacterial soaps that we use, and the pesticides, and the babies are being born today with PCPs in their bloodstream and their umbilical cord. So we need to detoxify. If we can detoxify the brain and the body, then we can trigger the renewal processes in their totality. And that's absolutely essential today. But we not only need to detoxify the body, we need to detoxify the emotions.
And can you explain the difference between emotions and feelings? Because I've heard you talk about it before, and it's, I think it's important that, people get a lot of stuck emotions in their mind and also in their body energetically. So can you explain the difference between emotions and feelings so that we may learn how to process emotions or feelings in a healthy way?
Well, for me, the emotions are very ancient survival programs from our limbic brain, our Neanderthal brain. And they're not authentic. Feelings are authentic, but emotions are these residual survival programs that don't function anymore. So that the brain resets itself every 20 minutes. So if you have something that lingers more than 20 minutes, it's an emotion. We've all wanted to kill. If you've been married or if you've had children, you've wanted to kill. And then a few moments later, you go, oh my God, how could I have felt like that about this person that I love the most in the world? And that's a feeling. Feelings wash through you. They don't last more than 20 minutes. But if you're angry for more than 20 minutes, that's an emotion. And there are people that have been angry for 20 years. And that's a toxic emotion. That will kill you. That will create the brain chemistry and the physiology that will take you to cancer and dementia. So ultimately, we have to get rid of our emotions. So we become empty vessels for experience and for feeling. For feelings of love, for feelings, you're angry, and it flows through you, it passes. It doesn't settle into your system or begin to fester within you.
And we do that. We do that through breath. We do that through how do we
How do we heal our emotions? You cannot heal your emotions. You can only get rid of them.
Oh, detoxify your emotions. Okay.
Well, emotions live in a part of the brain that's known as the emotional brain, as the limbic brain. It's the Neanderthal brain. It's the one that we shared with our really primitive ancestors. And this brain can only change through ceremony. That's why we have wedding ceremonies and birth rites and death ceremonies. This is the way this brain changes. It does not change through psychotherapy. So you've got to create significant ceremony for yourself. For example, if you feel angry, you might want to build a fire, light a candle, and blow that emotion into a toothpick and set it on fire and release it. So you're actually rewiring the brain through ceremony. But if you don't have ceremony, it's like two people coming together and saying, let's have a baby. Well, but you don't really have a family until you take part of a sacred ceremony. And it's not the ceremonies of religion. These are tired and old ceremonies. It's the ones that you create and that are meaningful for yourself and that are sacred.
Yeah, with ceremony, you're becoming conscious of what you need to release. Otherwise, it stays in the subconscious and you're just hamster wheel of life.
Yeah.
And it's getting in your body. Okay. That's good. Any other ceremonies practical tools are very helpful.
Well, we work with fire.
Okay.
So we work with the elements, and whenever you're doing ceremony, you're inviting your limbic brain to step up, to change its programming, to change the belief structures that you have around particular things. So the way you reconnect with the beloved is you have a ceremony with them, a commitment. I love you and I dedicate myself to us. And so that you can love your partner exactly for who they are, instead of what ends up happening is that I love you exactly as I am, instead of as you are. So we create these ceremonies for renewal, for commitment, and also for getting rid of our emotions. And then they're replaced by feelings. And feelings don't last. They wash through you, but you become a vessel for experience instead of a collection of different traumas and emotions that are still creating storms inside of you.
So I love people that are watching this and may, have a very scary cancer diagnosis or MS or perhaps a mystery autoimmune illness. And I love when you the more inspiring stories or the more kind of ahas they can receive that may reflect back to them what's going on with them. I think it's helpful for them to become conscious of stuff that's going on. So do you have any transformational stories or some themes that you've seen come up, whether it's with cancer, emotional themes that people may need to look at in themselves so that they can break through?
So let's take a look at cancer for a moment. First of all, from the energy medicine perspective, cancer does not exist. So what you have with cancer are cells that are breaking the prime imperative. And the prime imperative is that every cell in the body is going to work first for the well-being of the entire body, and then for their own personal well-being. So cancer cells are cells that decide that they want to be immortal, and they break that prime imperative. They want to survive no matter what happens to the rest of the organism. Now, humanity has become a cancer in the earth because we want to survive regardless of how many species we kill off or how many forests we cut down. So that's part of the problem. But cancer cells are cells that have broken that prime imperative, that they will dedicate all of their effort and energy and resources for the well-being of the whole person. And we have 100 trillion cells, so when a few of them go deviant, now what regulates cancer cells are mitochondria. So mitochondria are the fuel factories inside every cell. They produce energy, but they're also in charge of the death clock. So mitochondria tell cells when they need to die so that they can be replaced by new ones. So in cancer cells, you have mitochondria that are not functioning properly. They're not able to tell the cell that they need to die. So if we can restore mitochondrial function, then we restore the death clock and we're able to revert this process. And a lot of the direction of medicine today is going into mitochondrial medicine. How do we repair, restore, support mitochondrial function to create health? And this is the basis of energy medicine. If you create the conditions for health through your diet, emotionally, physically, spiritually, then disease goes away. You don't need to treat the cancer. Create the conditions for health, and disease does not appear or goes away.
And that's why we see so many spontaneous healings.
Absolutely.
With cancer.
Then you can become an outlier in the bell curve.
Yeah. That's great. It's just always good to reframe and look at it a different way, you know?
But my work is really bridging the ancient science with the cutting edge neuroscience today. That's why I came out of a brain laboratory and I went to the Amazon for 25 years.
Yeah. And that's the right balance, right? We take the best of what technology and research of today with all this, you know, new technology and ability to see what's really going on and prove what ancient wisdom has been just demonstrating for thousands of years.
Yep, precisely.
So talk to me more about this luminous.
The luminous energy field. Well, we have an energy field that surrounds the physical body and that organizes the body the way that a magnet organizes iron filings on a piece of glass. And in the West, we're accustomed to working only with the body, with the physical and not with the energetic. Whereas the energetic is the blueprint. This is where Chinese energy medicine, Qigong, the shamanic energy medicine works with upgrading the quality of the field. But there are a couple of important elements here. In the West, we believe that all the energy that we experience belongs to us. And the shamans understand that sometimes you're afflicted by energies that do not belong to you. So it can be an ancestor, for example, that died unconsciously and who needs to ask for forgiveness, that might connect with you and actually come into your field, and you might begin to manifest the symptoms of that ancestor that died with cancer or with heart disease that are not yours. And the minute that you can extract that entity, that intrusive entity, and of course, as shamans, we not only need to extract Uncle Harvey, but help him to die, to return back to the world of spirit. So at that point, I have two clients. I've got the client that came to see me and the ancestor that's attached to them. So I have to disconnect, I have to extract that ancestor, help them go back to the spirit world, and then symptoms resolve themselves very quickly. I remember one woman who brought her little daughter to me, and her husband had committed suicide when the daughter was 2 years old. And she discovered him, and she said, "Come, Daddy, wake up, Daddy, wake up, Daddy." And Daddy hated his life, but he loved this little girl. So he became attached to this little girl. And I saw her when she was 11 years old. She was in a classroom for children that did not speak. She was always hitting people and totally non-communicative. And I started tracking her field, and I saw that Daddy was there. But the minute she came into my office, she looked at me, turned around, and ran out the door. And my office was in LA, crossed Century Boulevard on her own to a Starbucks to the other side of the street. And because she knew that she was going to lose her daddy again. So after several meetings where she became comfortable enough with her, and Daddy knew he had to go. So we extracted Dad, and we turned him over to the lineage of shamans that work with us. And they returned him back to the world of spirit. They took him to healing centers in the spirit world. And at that point, the little girl, within 6 weeks, she became talkative, non-violent, non-aggressive, and was streamlined within 6 months back into the regular classroom. Took her off all her medication. She was no longer ADHD or a behavior problem. She didn't need to have sleeping pills to go to sleep at night. She only needed to get daddy out of her field. And this is so common, much more common than we'd like to believe.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, how is one to know whether it's a toxic imbalance or overload in their body, or an ancestor that's attached to them? There's so many.
Yeah, you go to a doctor and they say, well, your hormones are all out of balance. Frequently, this is caused by an intrusive entity that is most often a relative that died unconsciously. I'll tell you another story. When one of my first books came out, Random House published it. And I went to the Random House sales meeting to present the book. And they weren't interested in shamanism or energy medicine until this man walks into the room. And he says to the group of their national sales force, says, you all know that I've had a problem with alcohol for the last 10 years. I want you to know that I went to see one of Dr. Villoldo's graduates, and that was 6 months ago, and I haven't had a drop of alcohol since, and no cravings. Thank you very much. At that point, everybody became interested because everybody in publishing in New York has an alcohol problem. So they made the book a bestseller. And addictions are very, very difficult to treat. So the minute the meeting was over, I called my graduate and I asked her what happened. And she said, well, this man walked into my office, and walking in right behind him was his father's spirit. The father had died 10 years before, had been an alcoholic his entire life. And I asked her, what did you do? She said, I helped him to go back home. And the minute that the spirit was released, the symptoms began to resolve. And this is something we don't consider in our medical practices, but that is so common in 99.9% of the rest of the world.
That's amazing.
And another cause of disease is soul loss. Many of the people that I work with that are seriously ill have suffered trauma that caused soul loss. It caused a splintering of their soul. And what happens is that suddenly you lose your destiny. When you suffer from trauma that you do not heal in the moment, that you don't reconcile yourself with or repair, a part of your soul can splinter and you lose your destiny. And then you come into the grip of fate. And fate is fatal, is deadly. It's been pre-selected for you by your genetics, by the karma that you came with, by the drama that runs in your family. So as part of the healing process, I always do a soul retrieval for the person that I'm working with. I want to retrieve that innocent, healthy, healed part and not just treat the broken, painful, fearful, diseased part that walked into my office. And if I can recover that soul part, that quanta of energy, that person can recover their destiny in which they can find their health again.
That's amazing. I've done ayahuasca before, and on this last journey, they kind of prepared you to know what to expect and kind of how to navigate the journey. And part of it was reconnecting with your soul and healing your heart. Is our like plant medicine and the DMT and the mind-altered states, are those how essential are those to healing? Because I feel like, I don't know, it's a pretty intense experience.
It's a very intense experience. Yeah. I've only done it about 400 times. Oh. So, but yeah. So today there's a lot of ayahuasca ceremonies happening around the planet, and the plant medicine is really spread globally. It's incredible. I think it's a little bit scary in some ways, and you've got to be very careful with it, because in the Amazon you prepare for it. And then the shaman works with you to integrate your experience. But what happens, ayahuasca is DMT, dimethyltryptamine. And we produce serotonin, which is a common neurotransmitter. It's produced by our gut flora. 85% of your serotonin is produced by your gut. If your gut is broken through the use of antibiotics, your gut flora is not functioning, you're not producing serotonin. The formula for serotonin is 5-HT, 5-hydroxytryptamine. Hydroxy is water. Tryptamine is a tryptamine. So if you have adequate serotonin production and your pineal gland is working, the pineal gland loves to methylate. It loves to add methyl bonds to whatever it comes in contact with. It'll methylate serotonin, and it does this every evening to create melatonin so you can sleep. But if you take it a step further and you add 2 methyl rings to serotonin to tryptamine, you end up with dimethyltryptamine, which is ayahuasca. The brain produces ayahuasca naturally. And this is what allows you to meditate, to have an experience of oneness. If your pineal is calcified because of the pesticides in your food and the fluoride in the water, then you're not going to be methylating serotonin. You're not going to be producing the bliss molecules. You're not going to be able to meditate. You're not going to be able to heal because you cannot experience communion with nature, with Pachamama, Mother Earth, with the cosmos. So we need the substrate. We need the chemical substrate in the brain in order to have these experiences. You cannot have them only with your mind. And the chemical substrates are essential. Your gut needs to be functioning, your flora producing serotonin. Serotonin needs a healed pineal gland to methylate it so you can sleep well at night, to produce melatonin and rest deeply. And then so you could meditate and create the bliss molecules. Otherwise, you're going to be creating only the stress molecules, which are cortisol and adrenaline. Do you follow me there with the science?
I do, yeah.
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's why, the microbiome is kind of new in the mainstream. People are now they know about probiotics and gut health and how antibiotics,
Destroy your gut, yeah.
Yeah, use in an emergency to get you over the hump if need be. But for people that just pop them when they get a cold, which doesn't even correlate, it's good to know, how much our gut health impacts our brain health and our physical health.
It's incredible. It's all in the gut.
Yeah.
It starts with the gut. And do you know how you get your flora? So if you have a baby in your belly, it's completely hygienic and sterile. So a child gets a flora when she goes through the birth canal.
Right.
And there, the flora populates the skin and the gut. And then from going out into the backyard and putting everything in their mouth.
Yeah, connecting with Earth. And
you connect with the Earth, and you populate your gut flora. And the flora changes all the time. So your DNA will never change. With DNA, you can modify your genetic expression. We call that epigenetics. You can do that through your food you eat, that signals certain genes to express themselves or not, through forgiveness, through meditation, or through the upregulators, the turmeric, the resveratrol, the sulforaphane. But your biome, your microbiome changes all the time. And if you can maintain healthy flora, you're going to be producing the brain's substrates that allow you to create the bliss molecules and create psychosomatic health.
I want to go back to how, you talked about once you make that connection, that commitment to be an earth keeper, which is a demonstration of consciousness. I'm going to be more conscious in the world. I'm going to look at other human beings as golden Buddhas rather than this separation and fear. And then you mentioned something about telling the probiotics that you're not the enemy. You're not cancerous. Like, can you talk a little bit about intention and energy and
Sure.
and how that, how we need to be, how consciousness really dictates our whole experience?
We're always dreaming the world into being. The world that we experience is a reflection, is a mirror of our luminous energy field and of our intention. It reflects back to us the condition of our love and of our intent. So ultimately, it's all about the love that you can create and the intent that you can focus. Intent is what organizes the forces of creation to manifest in a way that's beautiful, or that's cancerous, or that's deadly, or toxic. So if you can work with your intention, but your intention needs to be aligned with a higher purpose. So it's not only to create health for myself, but for all beings. And for the medicine that I practice, that's called becoming an earth keeper. I make a commitment to be a steward of all life on earth. And then all life on earth supports me. Whether it be the lettuce and the carrots that I had in my salad, or the animal protein that you ate is no longer just animal protein. You're taking in the spirit of a salmon. The spirit of the salmon is now within you. So, and you honor that. And you speak to all creatures and all beings. So your probiotics, for example, we take our probiotics and we pop a capsule. And that doesn't do anything. It's going to go right through you, because these probiotics have been dehydrated, and now they're going to wake up in a stomach that's full of acid. And they don't want to do that. So you want to open that capsule, put it in warm water for 5 minutes so they can rehydrate, wake up, and then you can take them. But before you take them, talk to them and tell them, look, I'm part of the solution. I'm here to create beauty in the world. I'm here to bring healing and to bring the manifestation of the highest good for all of humanity and all creatures. And then all creatures will support you.
I love that. Two last questions. Forgiveness, you've mentioned it twice. It's very hard to do sometimes. Do you have any practical hacks on how we can forgive? I've just had a conversation with a woman who, she tries to look at her mother-in-law as the golden Buddha, but she just can't. She cannot see through that tension in the relationship. I have someone in my family I'm stuck with, and it's just, they're constantly a teacher. How can we forgive? How can we see the golden Buddha, even though they drive us nuts, or they hurt us tremendously, or they continue to do so?
Forgiveness is really essential for the healing process. And it has to do with learning the lessons that life offered to you. So that you got to remember that pain is part of life, but suffering is optional. Suffering is what happens when you don't learn directly through knowledge. And forgiveness is the way that you get back into alignment with learning directly through wisdom. So I had a student come to me and say, I finally forgave my mother. She's the most horrible human being, abusive. I finally forgave her. And I said, congratulations. But have you asked her to forgive you? And she said, why? She was abusive. She beat me. She was an alcoholic. I said, well, if nothing else, remember that you were inside her belly for 9 months and you were a parasite. You were eating before she ate. If you needed calcium, you take it from her bones. Ask her to forgive you. And simply stating that, please forgive me, is so healing. Or saying to another, I forgive you. All is well. The minute that you turn that into a statement that is truthful, because your intent has to be aligned behind it, it becomes an act of power. And then tremendous healing happens, and it's instantaneous.
Amazing.
So you can't go, I forgive you, you bitch. Because it's not it. That won't do it. Okay. I forgive you. Thank you for the lessons, no matter how difficult they were. And that becomes an act of power if you say it lovingly and with intent. Love and intent together, when they combine, it becomes an act of power that organizes reality. to reflect a greater truth.
Amazing. Thank you. So last question is, we ask what your one takeaway message is on healing.
I went through a very big healing journey not too long ago in which I was diagnosed with a liver that stopped functioning. I needed a liver transplant. I was told to get in a liver transplant list. I had picked up parasites and viruses as I was an anthropologist in the jungles in Asia and in Africa and in the Americas. And I had holes in my heart and parasites in my brain. So I knew I could probably get a new liver and maybe a new heart, but where was I going to find a new brain and a good brain? It's really hard to come by. So I went to Western medicine to kill the parasites. And Western medicine is really good at killing things. But then I had to go into energy medicine to grow a new liver, to grow a new heart, and to grow a new brain, which I have done today. So what I had to discover is what I've been teaching people all along, is that we are a living miracle, and that you're part of an experiment in intelligence, in consciousness, in spirituality. And you want to be part of the experimental group, not the control group. And for me, the experimental group is where n is equal to 1. So the number of people in the experiment, in my experiment, is 1. It's Alberto. So if you can embrace the fact that you're a living miracle and that you are the divine expressing creation through your intent and your love, that's what you will manifest.